Hello everyone, welcome to the Share Your Green Design podcast. Before we begin today's episode, just a reminder that you can follow and subscribe to us over on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also find the full video version of each episode over on YouTube. We're also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and WeChat at Share Your Green Design. That's all one word, Share Your Green Design. And remember, the podcast is only one small part of what is an ever-growing platform. So head on over to shareyourgreendesign.com to keep up to date with the latest in sustainable architecture, engineering, and construction. We've got projects, news, research, events, competitions, student work, jobs, everything you need. We'd love to have you as a visitor, but also as a contributor, so you're always welcome to send us your own projects, ideas, events, job openings, and much more. You'll find all the details on shareyourgreendesign.com. Once again, that's shareyourgreendesign.com. Thank you again for your support, and with that, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Danielle and Raquel, thank you both for being here. We're really appreciative of your time this early in the morning over in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Not so early over here where I am in Ireland, but so could you both start off by just kind of introducing yourselves? I've already given away where you are, but in the world, but where you're from and what you're doing these days.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's also an honor for us to be here today. My name is Danielle and I'm an architect. I'm based in Brazil right now in Sao Paulo, and I studied architecture at the University of Sao Paulo. And I also studied one semester at the German University Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And during my graduation, I worked in architecture studios in Europe and Brazil. And today, in addition to having an architecture studio together with Raquel, I'm also developing research in the area of sustainable construction.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. My name is Raquel. I'm an architect. I am graduated from Mackenzie University in Sao Paulo. And during my studies, I also did an exchange program in Germany, in Leibniz Universität in Hanover. And I started my practical experience doing an internship there in City Foster. And after returning, I finished my studies in Sao Paulo and already started working as an architect in different architecture studios here.
Cool. And how long have you both been in practice? How long ago did you graduate from university?
I graduated in 2019.
Okay.
Me too.
Great.
But I started working since 2016.
Okay. And when did the experience in Europe happen then? Was that like 2015, 2016 as well? Or did you start your education in Sao Paulo and then go to Germany and then you came back to graduate in 2016? Sorry, in 2019, sorry.
First, I started my graduation in Sao Paulo, and in 2016, I went to Germany and I studied there. And then I started working there. It was my first job as an intern in an architecture studio. And then I moved back to Brazil, and I also started working here in some architecture studios in Sao Paulo. And then I finished my graduation in 2019. Mm-hmm. And since then I'm working also in architecture studios here in Sao Paulo.
Cool. What made you go to Germany from Brazil? Because it's quite a long journey. I've never been to Brazil, but I've been to Chile, which I guess is actually kind of longer. But what actually made you both go to Germany?
I think for me the decision was because I see many research being developing in Germany, also in architecture and sustainability. And I think the universities there have a really good quality. So I wanted to go there and also to see a different culture. It's very different from Brazil, a different history, a different background. So for me, it was an important opportunity to experience something different. So that's why I decided to go there. And I think for Raquel was something similar.
Yeah. For me too. Danielle went first, so I visit her and I also like it, and I think was also interesting to do.
You sent her first to make sure it was okay, and then
Yes.
only after you saw she was enjoying it, then you went over. I have an older sister. I do that as well. Um, but and then so a big part of the reason that we wanted to talk to you, obviously, is your work in sustainability and your outlook in sustainability. And we'll try, I guess, throughout this conversation, we'll throw some of your projects up onto the screen, or afterwards we'll edit in some images so people will really get to see the kind of principles and the vision that you have behind all of your projects, and how they're all kind of linked with this, you might call a multifaceted idea of sustainability, where sustainability kind of runs through all of your projects, like form, materiality, how it's constructed. It's kind of ever present. I'm curious as to when that started. When did the interest in sustainability for you begin? Was it always there during your education? Did it grow over time? And how did you actually grow it then? Did you was it just a lot of research, a lot of studying other projects? Were there particular areas or particular materials you were interested in? How did that journey kind of start?
I think for me, it was like a progress. I first started hearing a little bit about sustainability in university. And then I think my interest was deepened when I started working in architecture studio here in Sao Paulo, when I had the opportunity to work on a big project in the city of Rio de Janeiro, which was a math institute. And this project was awarded for its commitment to sustainability. And I worked in this project around 1 year, and the experience, everything I learned during this project made me see the important role that architecture has in achieving a sustainable future, and also motivated me to seek more knowledge on how to integrate sustainability, technology, and architecture in order to find solutions that minimize impact of society on the environment. And then I started, and this motivated me also to start my final graduation project, which was the project in the Amazon. So I think it was a progress. I started seeing some things in university and also in work, and then yes, I started to research more about it.
Yeah, for me, I think it was a process too. But I think that the fact that I live in a big city like Sao Paulo with more than 12 million inhabitants, with problems like air pollution, traffic, water pollution, made me see a sustainable design not as an option, but as a necessity to improve the quality of our lives and our environment. And so I started circular economy um, in green design, in architecture and in urbanism as a way to change this scenario and improve the quality of our cities and how we live in them.
Mm.
So that,
Awesome. You mentioned as well, you just mentioned Sao Paulo and this massive city, 12 million people, did you say?
yeah.
Yes.
What is the attitude to sustainability in a city like that? Because one other comparison that maybe comes to mind is Los Angeles, where it's also a city, maybe not as big, but also grapples with issues of air pollution and car emissions. And it has kind of brought sustainability and the need for sustainability into a spotlight. And even at a government level, there's starting to enact changes and new legislation on sustainability. What is the conversation about sustainability like in somewhere like Sao Paulo? And I guess, I mean, we'll talk about the Amazon in a minute because of your project, but I would imagine that the effects of climate change are quite prevalent or would be felt in Brazil simply because of something like the Amazon rainforest, which is this kind of symbol of the beauty that we have to protect, but also through things like uh, uh, lumber industries in the Amazon forest and tearing down the Amazon is kind of a symbol of how far we need to go. So it's quite prevalent in Brazil, or it's quite homely in Brazil. So what is the conversation like? Does that actually does all of that actually filter down through how architects think about sustainability, or is it not a big conversation?
Well, I think if we compare Brazil to other parts of the world like Europe, I think we are a bit behind this discussion of sustainability. I think if we take Sao Paulo, which is a big city and have many problems, urban problems, we see there are still many difficulties to change how everything is done here, and I think some of these things is part from the government, which doesn't really invest a lot in science and education of also of the population about the importance of sustainability. And also there are a lack of investments in basic infrastructure like sewage system and water system. Here in Brazil, unfortunately, there are many people who don't even have the basic, like access to clean water and to garbage collection. So we can see there's still many things that we have to solve, and are difficult situations, and probably was going to take some years to change that. And well, and we also don't see a lot of the government to change this, but we can see several groups of researchers, architects, and also local communities who are fighting to change the situation, to guarantee a sustainable future. We have some small initiatives of local communities who are developing some projects to try to change these situations. But yeah, at the moment, I don't see it's something that it's going to change in the next years. I think it's going to take a bit longer.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that sustainable or green design in Brazil would look very different to sustainable or green design in Europe or somewhere else? And I guess what I mean by that is a lot of the time, and with the projects that we're starting to see on this website, things like material availability, even local culture, sources of energy, electricity, and even things like the kind of the economy and the kind of social economy and inequalities and all of these things come to bear in cities anyway. And they also, I guess, come to bear in the approach to sustainable design. From working in Germany and working in Brazil, do you think there's a lot of common approaches that can be taken to sustainability between both of those, or do the different kind of geographic and also cultural contexts mean they need very, very different solutions, or they need very, very different approaches, or are there kind of common things between all of them?
I think the approach is similar. Of course, we have different architecture because are different places with different cultures and history. But I think in the approach is similar. Like in sustainable design, we always try to design better for that specific region and climate, and thinking about choosing the materials according to the resources that are available on the region, and also the materials that are better for the climate, which will provide a building that has a better energy efficiency. So I think these approaches are common everywhere in the world, if you're in Europe or in Brazil. But of course, the results will be different because we're talking about places with a different climate and, well, different history. So, but I think in the essence is similar in both places.
Hmm. And it's kind of useful then to link that into some of your own projects, actually, because even your projects, they're not, even though you're based in Brazil, not all of your projects are in Brazil. Like we're going to talk a bit about in a minute, a bit about a project in Tanzania, the kind of rammed earth construction. So I guess you are kind of an example of two people that try to work across different cultures, different geographic contexts. Maybe we could start with the project that we alluded to, the houses in the Amazon, those kind of floating houses that you said began as a university project, and then but it's also gone on to being this award-winning example of a kind of more positive, engaging future, I guess, for sustainable design. You'll do a much better job of explaining the project than me. So do you want to briefly just introduce what the project is? While you're talking, when we edit this, we'll overlay some images so people watching this will be able to kind of see the images. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the project.
The project in the Amazon.
Sure.
Okay. So this project I started developing at the university. It was my final project. And it has the main objective of providing housing for a low-income population that live in the city of Manaus in very precarious and risky situations. So Manaus is the capital of the Amazonas state and is located in the center of the Amazon region. So I choose this city because it has a big importance, symbolic importance of representing the urban occupation in the Amazon. And but when I started doing this research, I realized that many of the social housing projects developed by the government, they were like generic models that were built everywhere in Brazil. They didn't really reflect the climate where it was built. So it was ignoring the social and also the cultural particularities of the region, and in the Amazon it was happening in the same way. So this project it emphasized the importance of rescuing the qualities of the traditional and the vernacular riverside architecture from the Amazon, incorporating features in its design that are familiar to the residents of stilted and floating houses of the region. So in this way, the building allows the residents to identify with the house and also to value the Amazonian way of life and local knowledge and local culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to explain a little bit about the volumetry of the building, it has 3 main levels. One variable according to the water level of the river. It's a floating level, and it floats because it is built over logs of asacu, which is a local wood from the Amazon, which has a low density, and so it floats on water. And there is also one net level at the street level, and a third one which is elevated. And at this variable level, there is a space for a diverse use like resting and fishing. And it also allows for a continuous communication, continuous dialogue with the local landscape, because it's always in contact with the water, and it's variable because the level of the water in the Amazon rivers varies a lot along the year. In the Black River, which is the river located in the city of Manaus, and the water levels vary around 10 meters along the year. So it's a lot. So the landscape changes a lot during the year. And and so there is this floating level, and there is also a street level where there are spaces for social and cultural activities. And there is a third level elevated, which was inspired by the stilt houses where the dwellings are located.
Mm-hmm. Firstly, it's an amazing project, if I didn't say that already. But and I'm sure everyone who's looking now would agree with that. But how could you give us an insight into how difficult or how much effort and research was needed to understand the local methods of construction, the local climate, and even mentioning kind of river levels rising and falling constantly. How did you go about understanding that kind of local condition? Was it a lot of reading? Were there people you had to talk to? How did you go about just kind of immersing yourself in that kind of local knowledge?
This was the first thing I started doing on this research. I knew this was the most important thing about this project. This project wouldn't be possible without doing this research first. So I tried to research in many different ways to find different opinions about the same thing. So I started looking for history of the local population, and I also looked into poems of local writers, local artists, to see
Oh.
what was their opinion about the situation, what was their vision about living in the Amazon. And Amazon has really good poets that translate it in a very beautiful way. And I also looked into news from the 20th and 19th century in some local newspapers to see the history of the city, how the city was, all the transformations that the city went through in the last century. And also I looked for researchers from universities in the Amazon. I tried to look for different opinions
Mhm.
from local people, from researchers, local architects. So, and yeah, and also many pictures from photographers that went to the Amazon, so I can see how it was in the past and how it is today.
Mhm. And then did that also then provide some answers into the kind of I don't want to say eye catching, because it's more it's more than that. It's more important than that. But the idea of the structure floating, and then also this really kind of beautiful elaborate timber structure, those kind of elements that when you look at the project immediately they kind of stand out. Did that research into localism answer some of those questions about how to construct it, how to construct the timber frame, how to build something that floats? Was that all also coming from local knowledge, or did you have to like bring in ideas from the outside into like floating structures, even from Europe, even I guess from the Netherlands does that a lot? But yeah, how did you approach those two elements specifically?
Oh, well, I think the most important inspiration was the local architecture. I
Mm.
studied a lot about the floating houses in the region and how they built the floating floor, how they make the house float, and using local materials like this type of wood that I mentioned, the asaku, which they it's very very usual to use this wood in the base of the houses so they can float. And also doing a research about the local architecture, I also learned a lot about which materials they use, which type of wood they use, because it's a, a forest that it's underwater some months of the year. The woods there has a really good resistance to water, so that's why they use this wood to build the stilt and the floating houses. And like this asaku wood, it can last around 40 years under the water. So they use this, even if they destroy the house and build another one, they still use the same wood for the new houses because it has a really good quality.
Mhm.
And so the main inspiration was this local architecture, but of course I also had some inspirations on projects of architectures in the Amazon, like Severiano Porto, which was an important architect there. He was also inspired by the architecture from the indigenous community in the Amazon, and everything he learned about bioclimatic design that he learned from the local architecture, he uh, put that in his architecture. So I learned also a lot about studying the project from him. And
Mhm.
so it was a mix of studying the traditional architecture and also the formal architecture, the academic architecture.
Mhm. Exactly. We could talk for two or 3 hours about the project, and there are some other aspects of it, including like using the local economy and local labor and local materials that I want to come back to in a second. But can we talk a little bit about another project, which is that Rammed Earth Health Center in Tanzania? Because having just talked about the house in the Amazon, I'm curious as to even when you look at the health center in Tanzania and then the houses in the Amazon, they look very different. But I'm interested to actually hear about how similar they might have been in approach. Because whether use of natural materials, engaging with local culture. So kind of the same way that you introduced the Amazon project, could you introduce the health center in Tanzania as well? And again, we'll put images of it as you're talking.
Yeah. So this is a project of a health and research center for a small community in Tanzania, designed for an NGO. And its program can be divided in three main zones: a public service and education area located on the main axis, and on the secondary axis, an employee's accommodation. This project has a modular structure. There are 6 buildings, and between them, there are green areas that helps provide a better control of temperature and purify the air and act as a sound barrier and have a positive effect on the well-being of people. And the building external walls are made of red earth, and which has a strength and durability, low maintenance, and is fire proven. And the thermal mass of the red earth walls provides comfort and eliminate the need of air conditioning or heating. And its thickness and density reduce the noise transmission. So I think this project reflects our vision of green design, being part of vernacular architecture, and using renewable resources on the building, like solar panels and cross ventilation and water harvesting too. And it was a project where we want to do something integrated with the landscape, and this is also the base of vernacular architecture too.
That's interesting. And how similar in approach was the health center in Tanzania versus the houses in the Amazon? And what I mean by that is, you talked about, for the houses in the Amazon, it involved a lot of immersing in local culture. The thing about local poets is really interesting. Actually, I wouldn't have thought of that. Was it a similar process in Tanzania, and was it more difficult in Tanzania? Because at least in the Amazon, there was, I'm guessing there wasn't a language barrier. And there was some kind of cultural connection between somewhere like Sao Paulo and Manaus. I imagine that Tanzania was a lot more challenging. Did it require more effort to understand what sustainability and the vernacular was in Tanzania?
Yes. So first, about the question about the similarities. Like I said, when I was talking about Europe and Brazil, I think also from Brazil and Africa, if we start doing a sustainable design, I think the approach is similar. The first thing we did was similar to the project that we did in the Amazon, was to do a research about local architecture to see how those people, those communities, and designed their houses, because in this way we can see which are the best materials for that location, which are the bioclimatic solutions that those communities use to guarantee a building that has a good thermal performance and a good energy efficiency. So it was a very similar approach. We started doing a research about the local architecture and local materials, and after that we started designing the project. Yes. So, and it was, of course, it was a bit more difficult because here in Brazil it was easier because I had contact with universities, so it was easier to find research and to find local writers and poets. And in Tanzania, I have never been there, and I was only using the internet to find all the information I had. I didn't have contact with communities there, so it was more difficult to find all the information. But the process was a bit similar.
Really specific question, but rammed earth, how difficult was that to deal with and to design? And what are your views on rammed earth? Because the reason I ask is because timber construction is something which has been a staple of sustainability for decades, but in recent years there's a lot of interest in rammed earth construction, not just in Africa but in Europe and elsewhere. And what are your thoughts on the material, having now used it to design a project? Uh, do you see it as been a really interesting future material, or do you think it's only really suited to certain climates?
Oh, I think it's a very, very good material. Like Raquel was mentioning, it has many advantage of using remnant earth. It has a good thermal performance. It requires a low maintenance, so it has a great durability, and it's also a material that is not that expensive. So when we are designing in communities like in Tanzania, you can use the local soil to build. In some situations you can use the local soil to build the walls. And I think we wanted to use the remnant earth because we see so many examples in Africa where they use this material traditionally, so we thought it was a good decision to use it there too, because they already have a local know-how on how to use this material, and also because it's very, very sustainable, and also because of all the qualities of the remnant earth structure.
Mhm. When we take those two projects together, then the houses in the Amazon and the health center in Tanzania, what do they, how do they show your approach to sustainability, or how do they show what your definition of sustainable design is? Because a lot of architects still think that sustainability is only really about mechanical systems like solar panels, rainwater collection, and those things are really important, and they're really valuable. But looking at those two projects that we've just talked about, you can see how your definition of sustainability goes beyond that. It goes to local traditions, and it goes to um, conscious choice of materials, and it goes as well to local economy. Like for example, the houses in the Amazon. I was reading about how a big part of that was making sure that local people could be involved in constructing the project, and that it would use local materials, and it would feed into the local economy. And um, to me, that's all part of sustainability as well. So does that kind of reflect your kind of base outlook on sustainability, that it's something which is just there from the very, very start of the project, and it's kind of a foundation that you're always aware of when you're making decisions about how will this be constructed, what will it be made from, who will construct it, as well as merging new technologies like solar panels and geothermal and rainwater collection. And rainwater collection is not a new technology, but it's been advanced. Yeah, what does that kind of say about sustainability to you?
Yes, I think it's a little bit like you were mentioning. For us, sustainability is not just about high quality, high technologies, new technologies, but it's something that I think it's the opposite of it. I think sustainability is more if we look into the past and see how people used to build their houses, and because they have a really good knowledge, and that unfortunately we lost it along. Um, our history,
Yeah,
because we usually think that these and traditional techniques are associated with underdevelopment, and we think that if we build like a building with steel and glass, it's more modern, would be better than these traditional materials. So I think for us, sustainability it's something that must be considered in the first stages of the design. Is not something that you add later, like if you add solar panels in the building after it's built, but it's something that is really, really associated with the design of the building. It's integrated into the design. So, and these solutions must not be seen as just a complement of the project, but the project itself. In the projects of in the Amazon and in Tanzania, the solutions were everywhere in the decisions that we were making. Like for example, the building's volumetry can help can favor natural ventilation and reduce the need for air conditioning, and also and the implementation of the building can help achieving a good thermal comfort. So all of these decisions that we made in the early stages of the design help and create a building that is more sustainable, and it's not just something that you can do later, like some technology that you add to the building, but it's part of the whole design process.
Raquel, what do you think of that? Is it the same to you? Does that attention to nature and to, I guess you might say, organic architecture, that is just as important as technology like solar panels, etc.? I guess it's both, isn't it? They're both important.
Yeah, I think so. I think that unfortunately, when we travel to North Brazil, I see a lot of houses made of bricks, and in the middle of them, there are some houses that are still using vernacular architecture, but it's kind of like people relate this like a poor construction, and if you have a better quality of life, then you build it with bricks. And I hope that we might change this with this idea of sustainable design, that vernacular architecture is a good design, is better than this the things that they are generic. Yeah.
That actually is really is a central point, and it's something that I think a lot of people miss about sustainability. I think a lot of people think, and particularly some designers and architects, but even the public, they look at sustainability as being a restriction or a requirement which is imposed on you. Whereas what you're doing with your projects is showing that if you ground design in sustainability and vernacular, you create potentially more beautiful structures than you would if you did try something generic, or if you followed a global style. That this effort to create a more sustainable architecture for the environment, it's not just the right thing to do. It can give huge benefits to people that live in those structures, purely by making more of an effort to ground design in culture and in local culture and in the familiar. So I guess it's kind of like a win-win. It actually, when you were talking about historically architecture not paying as much attention to nature, etc., it really reminds me of Frank Lloyd Wright, because he would say the exact same things back in the 1950s. I think he had this famous quote that for what we've called architecture for 2,000 years isn't architecture because it's not grounded in nature. And he was always really big about this idea that good architecture was organic. He would use words like organic and nature. He had this really famous interview in the 50s with I think it was Mike Wallace, this famous interviewer in America, and he was being asked about God and religion, and his response was, well, you spell God with a capital G, I spell nature with a capital N. It was a really beautiful a kind of an expression about how important nature and the organic was, not just in architecture but in his worldview. But architecture kind of creates worldviews, and it represents worldviews. So if we ground our architecture in the natural and the organic, it goes a long way to ground like a wider society in the organic and the natural. Does any of that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Could we talk a bit about the future then? Because we just talked about the past, I guess. I'm interested because as we were talking about earlier, you're both still at not the very start, but you're both at the start of your careers. You're less than a decade out of university, and yet you've already accomplished a massive amount, both in Brazil and globally, and you've clearly already developed this very mature and rounded view on what sustainability is. where do you see yourselves go? I don't want to ask that standard question. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? But where do you see your career going? And like what is the next kind of thing that you want to tackle? And what's the next kind of challenge ahead that you maybe haven't got to yet that you want to really focus on now?
Well, I think the next challenge that I want to do, that it's in my plan, is to develop a research to continue researching about the Amazon vernacular architecture and its lessons of sustainability to the Brazilian contemporary architecture. Um, because with this research, we aim to support the development of more sustainable and culturally integrated social housing projects, in an effort to change how the construction sector operates in the Amazon region, making it less impulsive and predatory. So
Yeah, I think I'm going to start how vernacular architecture can be combined with new technologies in order to make buildings more efficient, better integrated in the territory, with lower environment impact, and to attempt innovations, improvements in current constructions process in order to rethink contemporary architecture production from a more sustainable perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's one of the biggest challenge that we have with this research is to change the vision about vernacular architecture, and to change this vision about associating this with underdevelopment, but instead they created the opposite situation where we see that we can learn a lot with this and we can uh, improve our architecture with this knowledge.
Right. And how can we bring more people along on that journey? Particularly that point about respecting and incorporating the vernacular in sustainability, and even just paying attention to sustainability more broadly in architecture. I mean, the two of you are good examples of people who you've embraced technology, and it's paid dividends definitely to both of your careers. It has allowed you to grow this design principle that has generated very beautiful architecture. So studying sustainability has clearly been of benefit to both of you. How can we communicate that to more people? Like, how can we, and particularly young people, young architects and young students who maybe because of the way that they're taught, or maybe just the way that they first learned about sustainability, still think that it's just a requirement and something which is imposed. How do we get people to be passionate about sustainability?
I think the best way to do this is to inform better people, just so they can understand what sustainability is. So I think we could change this by promoting discussions, promoting events, or even inside the universities. I think universities have a very important role in this. So if we start teaching the young generations about it, and then we have the next generations of architects who are more conscious about everything, and then can also be more involved in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to stimulate more the students to research and think more than just reproducing generic ways, generic constructions, and using always the same materials. We have seen a lot of interesting research that it's about different materials of vernacular. You can see.
When I guess as well for the future and for future architects, is there any advice or was there any particular method or source or resource that you used to learn about sustainability that you think would be good for other people to follow? So, for example, that could be studying sustainable projects that are already built, or was it more about reading, or was it more about watching documentaries? Was it What was there any kind of approaches to learning that you thought were beneficial to you that you think other people could also do?
I think the best way for me to learn was to study the projects that were built. So I
Mm.
could learn how, in practice, all those knowledge about sustainability was done. So, like I said, my interest was developed when I was working in a very important sustainable project. So, was in this situation that I was motivated to research more about it. So I think for me the best way um, a- was to analyze these examples of projects where there is a sensible use of and management of natural resources, and yes, projects that use their technologies in construction and operation and also maintenance to reduce the like the global greenhouse gas emissions, and well, in this way to see how things are done in practice.
Mhm. Awesome. The last question then that we're trying to ask like all of our guests. You're only our second and third guests, but we're trying to ask everybody: are they hopeful or pessimistic about the future of sustainability and of our future of like addressing climate change in the built environment?
Well, I prefer to be hopeful because I think if you're a pessimist, then just okay, so just give up on everything
Yeah.
we are doing. So I prefer to be hopeful just to see. I think there is a big chance that we can change this bad situation that we are today. I think we still need some years to change that, especially in developing countries like in Brazil. We see the problems are really deeper, and it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of fight to change this. But I'm hopeful that things will be better in the future. I think we see a lot of bad news about climate change and pollution and deforestation, but I'm hopeful about the future. And I think at the time there are many debates on sustainable architecture. That these debates are growing and gaining more and more importance and attention in universities and also uh, in the communities.
Mm.
So I think this will change. I hope.
And what about you, Hakel? Are you hopeful or pessimistic about the future?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think it's hard. We live with a lot of bad news about climate change, but we still, at the same time, we are seeing a lot of things going on, and even in between the students, we see that it's getting more relevance. This thing.
We really appreciate you being here. We know how busy the two of you are, and yeah, congratulations again on everything that you've done. And we're really looking forward to seeing what's next, and probably continue to cover it and watch it with. We're hopeful as well because we can see projects like this. But yeah, thank you both of you.
Thank you very much for this conversation. It was really nice conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us.
That's all from us for now, so thank you for tuning into this episode of the Share Your Green Design podcast. Just a reminder before you go, you can subscribe to us over on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere you get your podcasts, or if you prefer watching the conversation, you can find us on YouTube. You can follow us over on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and WeChat at Share Your Green Design. That's all one word, Share Your Green Design. And remember, the podcast is only one small part of a much larger platform dedicated to sustainable architecture, engineering, and construction. To keep up to date with the latest projects, news, research, events, competitions, student work, and job adverts, head on over to shareyourgreendesign.com. Thank you everyone for your support, and we'll see you next time.